Hi there, I'm David.
And I'm Con, and we're back for another episode of Camera Peeps. David.
Con, well, we've got this one to ourselves. We are going to talk about a 2/3 inch ENG camera, and it is the PXW-X500 from Sony, and this particular camera is mine, and it's part of my lineup of cameras that I have to sort of cover all sort of aspects of the work that I do now.
Mm-hmm. And I see we've got a few photos of the camera up here. So what's so good about 2/3 inch cameras, David?
We can't really sugarcoat the fact that 2/3 inch cameras, ENG cameras, actually do some things better than super 35mm cameras in the corporate world, in the broadcast world. And I know people watching this video might say straight off, strike it off because it's not 4K. There is a 4K version of this camera, and it's a PXW-Z450. So it looks the same and it is 4K. So we're just going to use this as a real world case study.
Mm-hmm. As we can see from the photos here, the form factor is that of a run and gun camera. What makes a camera run and gun in your opinion?
What makes a camera run and gun for me is the fact you just open up the camera case and you turn it on and it's ready to roll really quickly. This camera is a step up from the F800, which is still a great workhorse for a lot of people. I find that this camera actually does quite a few things better.
Yep.
Most things it does better. The only thing that the F800 does better than this, it probably just boots up quicker. You can actually just turn it on and start recording quicker than this. That's one thing I've noticed. But this thing is lighter.
Also, I think the form factor, the fact that you can just chuck it on your shoulder, it's well balanced. You don't have to make a Frankenstein rig like you have to with DSLRs.
And I find that despite all the talk about Super 35 and full frame cameras, there is still a need for a 2/3 inch camera in my business.
I couldn't agree with you more. I still have my 2/3 inch camera because they're ideal for certain jobs, such as
corporate work, such as recording an event, an awards night, and I still freelance to the TV stations, and of course they're all 2/3 inch cameras, so I need to be able to slot in to their system, which this does very well. Satellite links, microwave links, SDI out, straight in. This camera is fantastic, and it's just integrated, self-contained package, no lens servos hanging off or anything. It's just there.
And can I say, looking at the picture here, you own all these cameras, so it's no longer is it one camera does all. You almost need to have a fleet of cameras and pick the right camera for the job. Is that correct in saying that?
Absolutely. And I mean, this may seem a bit of an indulgence, it is, but I use all of these cameras, and a lot of people will already be familiar with the scenarios. We have the live cross TV camera, we have the cinema camera for the interviews, we have the B cameras, the A7S cameras for the sliders and the movies and things like that. So,
yep, there's your full complement. Each camera does a particular job better than the other.
That's it. And I've extended myself a bit to have all of these cameras, but we know that hiring equipment can add a couple of hours to your day, getting to the rental facility early, pick it up, drop it off at the end of the day. It can easily add a couple of hours to your workday.
Yeah, indeed, I totally agree.
So what I thought we'd do is let's just go straight into it. We're recording the output, the menu output of this particular camera, and I just wanted to maybe go through some of the things that this camera can do. So if we just go into the operation menu here, we go into this record format, and any F800 or PDW-700 users will be familiar with the highest record rate, bit rate is 50 megabits per second.
That's right, and the codec is an old MPEG-2 codec.
Yeah,
too.
Absolutely. So what you can do here is you've got the options for all these contemporary, if you like, Sony codecs, and that one there, that's the 100 megabits per second codec.
Yeah, and that's an intra-frame codec, and that's based on the H.264 algorithms or derivative of that newer sort of algorithm.
Yeah, that's great. But people just want to know what are the numbers. How fast does a car get to 60 miles an hour? People just want to know, how many megabits per second is that? And you just say it's 100 megabits per second.
Yep.
But another thing that this camera has is this codec here. Now this
that looks familiar.
this is the old HD cam codec, or a variation of the old HD cam.
So it's HD cam SR Lite, so it means it's only 180 megabits, not 400 or 800 megabits like the old HD cam SR.
But
HD cam codec was, yeah.
But that's still not bad
Yeah.
for an ENG camera.
Oh, definitely, because the XAVC-I was 100 megabits. This gives you a bit more data. So what's the big deal about data? The more data, the better quality. Is that correct?
Better quality and artifacts, all those sort of issues. So one thing about having the XAVC codec, or the higher bitrate records, is we can actually do slow-mo.
Okay, how high can you go?
120 frames.
That's fantastic. And is that in the XAVC-I codec, or do you have to drop codecs to get to that?
No, the XAVC codec.
Wow,
and
that's impressive.
yeah, it's great. But in the real world, if someone says, you know, we need to do some sports stuff, in the past it was Super 35, big lenses, bad zooms. I mean, great zooms, but you know, you can do a type, big and heavy,
expensive to rent.
Yeah, and this scenario here is this was test footage, but this is real world stuff. You know,
so you're at a cricket match here, I see.
Yeah, just my old school actually, but they kindly gave me permission to come and film their match. But you know, this is on the boundary line. You know, I'm on the boundary line. The classic News 22 times lens with a 2 times extender, and I'm able to just be on the boundary line and getting, you know, really good ISO footage.
So another advantage of doing the slow-mo on the 2/3 inch camera, you can zoom right in to the action there in the middle of the field with a 22 times zoom, and it's not big or heavy, and the 2/3 inch sensor allows you to do that, doesn't it?
That's right, and also having the zoom command. You're totally comfortable. You know, you adjust the pan handle. The ergonomics are fantastic. You can crash zoom, pull wide. Because in the past, you know, we've really had the only option of Super 35 cameras to do that, and the cinema lenses, or if you attempt to do it on a DSLR lens, you know, it'd be crazy.
Yeah. Well, you're not going to get all the way into the middle of the field with a 70 to 200 Canon lens. I don't think. Not tight enough.
No,
as you can with this lens.
And you won't be able to follow the action as you can, you know, when you have a zoom command.
See, that's another advantage of these ENG lenses, ENG cameras, the fact that you can plug in zoom demands. And I know you can do that with cabrios on 35mm cameras, but, you know, the focal lengths, because of the larger sensor, the lenses become bigger, heavier, more expensive to be able to get the same reach as the smaller 22 times.
But also, in the 2/3 inch camera world, I mean, you have to remember, those of us who have accessorized our Super 35 rigs, we know it's just endless. Buying servo motors, and of course in there is 3 motors.
Oh, that's right.
Incorporated. There's the iris, the zoom, and the focus, and the interfaces are all there just to connect straight to CCU consoles. The TDs can make their adjustments. You know, it's already built in. No one talks about it. It's just that you can't see it.
Because let's face it, this form factor of camera was the original run and gun camera.
Yeah.
It was made so you can turn it on, power it up quickly, shoot anything that happened in front of you quickly and efficiently.
Yeah, and it's funny that the camera behind me there is over 30 years old. It's not a camcorder, it's just a camera, but it's interesting if you sort of look at it. The white balance switch is still there, the VTR switch is still there. A little bit different here, the gain is there, and it's just slightly different, but in essence it's the same.
So the form factor hasn't really changed much. They sort of got it right, just refined it in small steps.
Yeah, the viewfinders are the same, and you know, and that's another thing about a 2/3 inch camera. You know, these viewfinders are fantastic because in these conditions, you know, if you're working early morning, the sun's in your face. You know, you need a good viewfinder. The viewfinder on a camera, you know, when you're working in broadcast, particularly, it's like a temple for your eye.
Yes.
Every bit of information is in there. The composition, the camera settings, the color temperature, everything is there. This is so critical.
So a lot of cameramen really relied on their viewfinders, and if they ever went to someone else's camera and their viewfinder was set up differently or inferior or a cheaper version, it could really throw you because once you got to know your viewfinder and its settings and stuff, it was
That's me. I still use black and white viewfinder.
Oh really? You haven't gone colour? Why is that?
I haven't. I mean, they're good. The black and white viewfinder still does some things better than a colour viewfinder. I'm not going to go into it, but also a high-end colour viewfinder is upwards of 10,000 Aussie dollars.
So what's a black and white viewfinder? 2-3 grand or 4 grand?
I think it's about 4.
4.
Yeah,
okay.
but for me, from a business perspective, $10,000 will buy me another FS5 or update another camera or buy me another lens. So also with this camera, the LCD screen on the side here, those of us familiar with the F800s and the 700s, was pretty grainy, pretty ordinary. This is actually a great
so they
LCD screen.
improved that rear LCD, because I remember on the XD-Cam 800s, you put it on the picture and it was so soft, it was hardly usable.
No, this is fantastic, and so if you have a client who's in tow, I just don't do the mounting a monitor up here. There's just no need. It's just extra weight. It's more connections. It's more batteries. This is good enough
for them to quickly have a look at what the shot is.
Review shots or whatever. So that's another great thing about this camera. Okay, so while we're on this page here, the record function setting here, if we go down to simultaneous record, that's a feature now that's standard in the FS5, I think. But basically, I can record to both S/S cards at the same time.
So you do an instant backup?
Absolutely,
which is handy sometimes. If you know you can't data wrangle the card straight away and you want to make sure you've got 2 copies, you have to catch a flight straight after you shoot, there's no time to data wrangle, at least you know you've got 2 copies.
And anecdotally speaking, I've never had a problem. I've never had a problem. So I'll just move on in the menu here. This is another interesting thing about this camera, proxy recording mode. In the 700s and the 800s, there was no option for bit rates. On this particular camera, I can actually record. I actually have some options, and I leave mine set at this 9 megabits per second bit rate, and the quality in playback is absolutely fine. Now that's been my emergency. I've used it once, and it was my own job. It was actually one of our jobs, and I had to format a card that I hadn't backed up some of our footage on. It was no big deal. And then I thought we'll have to reshoot it, and then it dawned on me, no, we've got the proxies.
And that was good enough to use.
It was good enough for the website. So that is totally fine. And another great use for this high quality proxy is media training. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah. I've done a bit of media training, and I struggle to give them what they want, and that is a file they can take away with them and play on PCs, because my problem is I can do proxy files, but they're .movs, not MP4s.
No, and this when I'm packing up after a media training session, it's just simply laptop. And the SD card goes in, and just copy the file over to the USB stick for each client, each person who's been trained. And the time that takes is it's not a great amount of time. And by the time
9 megabits, the file sizes aren't too big at all.
And they walk away, and
they can play it on their PC or Mac.
PC, So I find that a really interesting.
I think anyone who does a lot of media training, that alone says to me a must-have.
Well, look, we used to drag
in any camera.
Well, we used to drag DVD recorders up, and that was another road case. And
I'm sure you remember VHS recorders.
I do. I wasn't going to mention it, but it was. But even the DVD recorder. You know, the amount of plugs and cables. You know,
and
XLR to RCA, and
very complicated.
And formatting the DVDs at the end of the job.
Too. I've forgotten about that.
And then that's fine, but of course, you know, most laptops don't have DVD.
That's right.
Anymore.
They're a gone thing.
So you know this proxy quality is fantastic, and I do well. It serves 2 purposes to me. One, it's an emergency backup for the footage if something happened to the S/S cards, and it's quite a usable picture quality for internet or web footage or the media training.
Or if you're overseas and you're doing a story and you quickly want to send back to the station, low size footage for them to use that you can upload through your hotel internet.
Yeah.
You do that rather than your big files.
Well, I think also with those lower bitrate options, which we'll get onto a bit later, this camera does stream, but we'll talk about that later. And I think that's a function of this camera. If the newsrooms were, say, to switch over from their disc-based cameras to this particular model, then they are going to have a lot more options of just transferring proxy files from the mobile phone app.
Well, I know a couple of guys who do stringer work around Melbourne, and they've invested in these little camcorders. I think JVC, one comes to mind, that has, you can plug in that streaming dongle directly into it, and it can stream live.
Well, there's the dongle.
Okay, so this camera will do it.
This
as
will
well.
do it, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
We'll talk about that in another video.
Yeah.
But we're going to need a bit of help from Sony on that one. There is a base station for this camera. I think it's the PXW-X500 or something. That could be wrong, but it's a base station which would go in the server rack, of the news exchange or at the back of master control or whatever.
Yep.
That stuff's still unfolding, but that's another thing that makes this camera a good workhorse and something, a camera that you can actually have for a little while, for a few years, because we want to get some.
And it makes it versatile. You can use it in E&G, news, corporate, media training, lots of different uses, which is handy. When you're investing in a camera, you want it to be able to do as many jobs as possible.
Yeah, look, I love this camera, and I know everyone talks about Super 35, and of course the latest thing now is the Venice. That's not my world, but certainly it's Alexas, Miras, it's F5s, F55s, and of course, the Panasonic equivalents of all those cameras, and no one talks about these cameras. But from a business point of view, if you are a freelance camera person, you have to guide your clients through, what's the best
tool for the job.
And let's face it, an awards night or a speech or a conference that runs for 2 days, I'm afraid these cameras do it better.
Well, here's a photo, for example, of you at a venue at a hotel. You're situated in the back of the room, and you have to film someone at a lectern at the other end of the room. It's very hard to do with the Super 35mm sensor camera or a full frame sensor camera on the DSLR.
Yeah, and on this camera, I don't give it a second thought. I know, I'm up on the riser at the back of the room, and I've got the 22 times lens and the zoom command, and you can do the the locked off speeches, or you can just make the subtle moves when someone comes up to the stage, or they change speakers, or someone comes up to collect their award, and it's all just super smooth.
Exactly, and you can plug audio directly into it. Easy.
And you deal with the guys, the AV guys, internally, and they're that's another thing. You might supply the feed, the vision to the big screen or whatever,
That's right.
And I've had a situation where I turned up at an event. They weren't seeing my signal, and of course it turned out the projector was 720.
Not 1080.
Not 1080, and it's great, no problems. Just go into the menu, switch it over, there it is.
Yeah, 720 50p.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah.
So in this scenario here, a lot of people will be familiar with this, the hotel space. And I had this as for the tight shot following the action, people coming up on the stage, rolling on the speeches, Q&A in the audience, when the AV people, rush out to, with a radio hand mic for people's questions, etc.
Yep.
And I had the FS5 locked off on a wide shot, so that would cover me when I'd reframe for this. So it's a great thing about this PXW range of cameras, the FS5 on the waveform monitor and the vector scope, they actually match, they actually come quite close.
Here's an example here. So you've actually taken to a technician and got him to line up the cameras,
Yeah.
And here's the proof in the pudding. He's actually used a device to overlay both waveforms of both cameras. Here's the vector scope. So as there's proof in the pudding there how well they've been able to match both cameras. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's incredible, and it suits me once again at those events. And you can tell your client, I go, well, look, we can have 2 cameras, but we can, do it at a budget, but it's a great result at the end, and you can cut out the the repos with the main camera. You've always got that wide shot too, and it's not a huge jump in the edit. It's not like the colours are changing. You know,
See, anytime you do a multi-camera, that's the biggest challenge, is having the shots match. And the easiest way to do that is use the same cameras, the same sensors, even the same lenses. Because even if you have the same cameras, but one's a different make to the other, that can affect the matching.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Absolutely, yeah. And I just know I can go to those jobs, and there's a lot of things I don't have to worry about. You know, the cameras are just there. You know. Okay, so look, I'll just go back in the menu here. We're going to skip past paint. That's another video in itself.
Yeah, you really got to know what you're doing in there, otherwise you can really affect the image if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, and this video is about, you know, what this camera, just some of the real world practical things about this camera.
And this form factor, the 2/3" form factor.
Yes, and also, Con, you may notice that the menu structure in this camera is very similar to the F5 and the F55.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
So if you do have both cameras, it's great, because it does make it easy when you're using one camera one day and another camera the next. So I'll just come down here to audio.
Yep.
We won't dwell on here too long, but it's another thing that I really love about this camera.
What's that?
It actually has the audio pots for channel 3 and channel 4.
Yeah, as we can see here in the photo, a close up in the photo.
In the photo. So we can assign radio. It just gives you a lot more options. Just breaking away from just the auto only. There was no option. It was just
well, some even 2/3" cameras, channels 3 and 4 are auto only option in the menu.
Yeah.
You don't even get pots like you do here to control them. That's pretty good.
If you go into the audio menu, there's a great range of adjustments. So having control over channel 3 and 4 does make it interesting. Especially, I keep talking about that corporate event where there might be 2 lecterns, one camera left, one camera right, plus there's question and answers from the audience. So we can take those 4 individual channels and have different levels and not actually have to record the mix.
What? So you would record all those 4 channels on that one camera?
On that one camera.
How do you do it?
How we do it. Okay.
Most cameras only have 2 XLR inputs.
Yeah, well, I've had this cable custom made.
Yep.
So it's a 5-pin.
Oh, so you're plugging into the mic input at the front.
Right, so what I do is unplug the camera mic.
Yep.
Plug this guy in.
Yep, the 5-pin male end. Yep. So that's normally where your stereo mic would plug into.
Correct.
And that's why it's 5 pins.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then obviously I would have longer cables on there.
Yep.
But then that gives you your 2 extra, or channel 3 and 4.
Yep.
And it's also great if you know, you have a panel discussion or something. Everyone just has lapel mics on.
Yeah.
And if you are going through microwave links or satellite uplinks where there are all the audio channels embedded, it's great at the other end. They can de-embed the audio and actually mix it themselves and not get what they're given. And if you wanted to, once again, I have this, as we've seen in other videos.
What's that?
Well, this is the Sony bracket so I can get that receiver into there onto the F5. But the layout on the back here accommodates this particular bracket. So if you really wanted to, you could actually have 4 Sony radio mics.
The slot in into the body there, plus
that one.
Another dual receiver on the back.
On the back.
Oh, wow.
That's an option. I don't have 2 receivers, but it is an audio option.
So speaking of slot in audio receivers, that's another thing about this form factor, that rather than having an external thing that's longer, bigger, and cables running out of something, you've got this neat form factor of the dual receiver going straight into the body, talking directly to the menu of the camera.
Yeah. And it's this streamlined camera that we're talking, almost, I think aerodynamics. It's just smooth. You can walk through doorways, you can walk through, things aren't going to catch, HDMI cables aren't going to pop out when there's pressure. It's just integrated, it's just self-contained, and that's what I love about it. And if there is a problem somewhere, it's just a lot easier to find the fault, because everything's familiar, everything's internal. You don't have to reset servo motors. It's just self-contained, and I love it.
the least amount of things that can go wrong on a shoot, the better for all of us. Yeah.
Well, I did a job recently where I had to do promos and TVCs, and then the following day, connected to that job, was a public event where this person was there, and I used the F5 one day and I used this the next, and it was a major event. And you know, you could have offered me any high-end camera, the most expensive Zeiss or Cooke lenses. I would not have swapped it for this, because it's the best thing when you're in the pack, you know, and it's rock and roll, you know. When the celebrity, you know, is moving and it's just police and security guards and everything, you just get in there amongst them, and, you know, having this sort of bigger form factor, you know, they kind of know, well, yeah, he must be the media, he must be the real thing, you know, he's the real thing. But, you know, once again, when you go through those crowds and things, you know, that's when, you know, cables can fall out, or, you know, if you had an external recorder on your...
which you probably have to power separately.
Oh, the whole thing.
Because that's another thing, these cameras, I guess, offer two D-taps, one at the front and one at the back off the plate. So you could power stuff directly.
Yeah. And it does have one Hirose 12 volt.
Oh, that for radio mics or something
and
like that.
that's services, certainly the powering the Sony one. We get another page with the audio, and it's about the current range of digital microphones. We get a whole page here, and this could be another video in itself, so we're not going to talk about it a lot, other than they do interact, the transmitters and the receivers do interact, share some of the information, battery levels and things. So that, and in the viewfinder here, I get the RF level, and so that means that
that's great.
That's
to have
fantastic.
all that information at your eyeball or fingertips. Yeah.
And some people might say, why? I go, well, I can tell you why, because if you do end up at a major event where there's an OB and there's other media, there will be quite possibly a clash of frequencies.
Oh yes.
Well, when the AA batteries start going flat in the transmitters, it starts blinking.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a fantastic feature.
It is really
Because you
good.
can be caught out the worst time having transmitter batteries on the tail go flat.
Yeah. That's another great feature of this camera.
Yeah, most definitely.
Okay, so as we go through the menu, we'll just skip over some things. APR, we're familiar with that, the dead pixels.
Oh, no, I don't know what APR is. What is APR?
Don't you know?
No.
Oh, okay, right.
No, please educate me.
Oh, okay, right. APR, this is, it's an acronym. It's a Sony acronym, and I can't remember. It's something like something pixel replacement or something.
Refresh.
Something like that, yeah. So it's probably not important that you remember what it stands for. It's probably important that you know how to find this in the menu, because it is important. So if you are it's more the evening that you noticed, or dark situations, the camera's been on for, once the camera warms up, then the dead pixels start to expose themselves, and if you might be on +3 or +6 gain. The higher the gain, the more obvious they are. I've had them pop up when you least expect it. I've hidden them. I've altered my framing just to sort of hide them, in a shirt or something. But sometimes if you're wearing a dark top, it could be obvious. And
because they usually are white, bright.
It's a white thing,
dots,
and to me, the pixel thing is basically a nightmare for me, because in the early days of the CC, I had a lot of problems with dead pixels, and I'm not sure if people can relate to that or not, but I think you had to black balance or something, or you actually had to take it to the Sony technicians.
And didn't they used to laser burn it out
I
or
don't
something?
know what they did, or they masked them somehow and you'd get it back. But fortunately, this function here, if I notice the dead pixel, this is the one, and you just go into there and you basically hit, I won't do it because it takes a few seconds, and it's a little process, a little timing thing, and then the next thing it says APR completed, I think, and then voila, the dead pixel's gone.
Does it work?
Absolutely.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So to test a camera for dead pixels, as I say, I have a particular eye for it, because I've had some shockers with dead pixels, and they're probably more noticeable in a black and white viewfinder.
Yep.
and when the camera's really warm, when it's been on for a long time, and certainly when gain goes in, they start to expose themselves.
Yep. And is this a problem of just 2/3 inch sensors, or is it a problem of all sensors?
Well, F5 users will know, be familiar with, just about every time you turn the thing on, it says execute APR.
Is that what that means?
Yeah, that's what that means.
Oh, all this time I had no idea what that meant.
Yeah.
And people ask me, go, I don't know, just say
Oh,
yes.
is that right?
Yeah, I had no idea
Okay.
that that's what APR
Yeah,
is.
that's what it is.
You're right, every time you flick it on, it asks you to do it.
Yeah, and once it warms up and the camera sort of says, no, it's fine.
So that's what APR
that's what it means,
is.
yeah. And that's why when it says, close, cap the lens, you have to do it. And that's another trick. If you are on a cinema lens,
Yep.
Actually the iris doesn't close completely.
No, that's
So-
the difference between an E and G
Yeah.
lens. The Cabrios will do it, I believe, because the
okay.
Cabrios are a hybrid of cinema lens
Yeah.
and E and G lens.
Yeah. But I noticed on a cinema lens I was using the other
Yeah,
day, it
no.
didn't cap off,
No,
and you
you're
would have to
right.
put on. So that's what that's about. So I didn't realise that was
I did
uncommon
not know
knowledge.
that. Yeah.
Oh no, I know that, and that's why when I see that menu come up and I thought, oh, that message come up, then oh no.
Yeah. So why does the camera on the F5 ask you to do that? Does it detect a dead pixel, or is it doing it just to be on the safe side?
Well, I guess it does detect it.
Wow. So
yeah.
every time I've seen it come on, it's detected a dead pixel.
Yeah, and then as the camera warms up, it must say, okay, it's gone, it's warmed up. But
I
I have to admit, I'm master of noticing dead pixels. I'll be watching the TV, even some studio cameras. I notice them.
Yeah.
Yeah, the big studio cameras. Yeah, to me, it's a nightmare. And
Wow. There you go. I've learned something.
okay.